In the early spring of 1996, the rural community of Black Hollow, Missouri, was preparing for another planting season. Life here was slow and predictable, with neighbors stopping to chat along the gravel roads and everyone knowing who belonged to which tractor. But that peace shattered one April morning when 54-year-old Harold Kinney, a respected hog farmer, failed to show up at the co-op. By evening, he was officially reported missing. Harold's farm sat on the edge of a dense patch of woods, the kind locals referred to as the Hollow. Friends and family searched the property, calling his name, but found nothing out of place. His truck was in the driveway, keys still in the ignition. A half-filled feed bucket sat on the porch. The last confirmed sighting came from a neighbor who had waved to Harold the previous afternoon as he walked toward his barn. When deputies arrived, they quickly noticed something odd. There were no fresh footprints in the soft earth between the house and the barn, not even Harold's. It was as if he had vanished in the 20 feet between his porch and the barn door. Search dogs picked up his scent, but only for a few yards before losing it entirely. Rumors spread fast in a small town, and Black Hollow was no different. Some whispered about old Native American burial grounds said to lie beneath the property. Others claimed the woods were haunted, pointing to strange lights and eerie noises that had been reported for decades. One elderly farmer even recalled a story from his grandfather about a whistling man who lured people into the hollow, never to return. The official investigation focused on more earthly explanations. Detectives considered foul play, perhaps a dispute over livestock sales or a debt gone bad. But nothing fit. Harold had no known enemies, and his finances were solid. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, and no evidence anyone else had been on the property. The case stalled within weeks. Then came the discovery that unsettled even the most skeptical residents. About a month after Harold's disappearance, a teenager hunting turkeys in the hollow stumbled upon one of Harold's boots. It was standing upright in the middle of a clearing, but the ground beneath it was untouched. No impressions, no drag marks, nothing to suggest how it got there. The boot was dry, despite heavy rains the day before. Investigators searched the clearing for hours, but found no other trace of Harold. That summer, the Kinney family sold the farm. The new owners lasted less than a year before moving out, citing personal reasons. Neighbors noticed they left many of their belongings behind, including a tractor and several head of cattle. The property has changed hands twice since, each time abandoned after only a short stay. Today, the barn still stands, its roof sagging, the paint long since peeled away. Locals say if you stand in the clearing where Harold's boot was found, you can sometimes hear faint whistling carried on the wind, even when the air is still. Some believe it's the spirit of the whistling man, still calling for his next victim. Others think Harold may be alive somewhere, though how a man could simply step out his front door and disappear without a trace remains a mystery. The vanishing at Black Hollow Farm is more than just a missing person case for the people of this small Missouri town. It's a reminder that even in the most familiar places, among the fields, barns, and gravel roads you've known all your life, there can be shadows deeper than the woods themselves. And sometimes, those shadows are waiting for you to step inside. I own a small dairy farm in eastern Ontario. In July 2020, just after sunset, I was walking back from the pasture when I saw her. A woman in a pale dress, standing perfectly still at the edge of the hayfield. She was facing away from me, her head tilted slightly to the side. I thought maybe it was a neighbor in trouble, so I called out. No response. I called again, and she slowly turned. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but her mouth was wrong. It stretched too far, like the skin was being pulled. I dropped my flashlight and ran to the house. When I looked back from the porch, she was gone. The next morning, there were deep, narrow footprints in the mud where she'd been standing, too deep for a person that size. Our ranch has been in the family for 3 generations. There's an old stone well behind the barn that we've never used, mostly because my father always said it was bad luck. One night in March 2018, I heard splashing coming from the direction of the well. I figured maybe a raccoon had fallen in. When I shined my light down, something looked back at me. Its eyes were huge and glassy, and they blinked sideways, not up and down. Then a pale hand reached up, curling over the rim. I ran so fast I didn't even think to cover the well. The next morning, the bucket was gone, and the rope looked frayed, like it had been chewed. I own a 60-acre farm just outside of Macomb, Illinois. We grow mostly soy and corn, with a small orchard and a few goats. My wife, Anna, and I have lived here for 9 years, and it's usually quiet, the kind of place where your closest neighbor is a mile away, and you can count the number of cars that pass by in a day on one hand. This happened in September of 2022, during the tail end of harvest. That evening had been normal enough. I was finishing up with the combine while Anna tended to the goats. The sun had just set, and the last bit of orange light was fading into a deep blue sky. That's when the machine suddenly died. No sputter, no warning, just dead. The lights went out, the engine stopped, and my phone screen showed no service. I climbed out of the cab, and right away I noticed something wrong. The air was silent. No crickets, no frogs, not even wind moving through the corn. I've worked these fields for years and never once heard it this still. Then, from the edge of the orchard about 50 yards away, something shifted between the apple trees. It was tall, thin, and pale, like a person, but not moving like one. The second I aimed my flashlight, it ducked out of sight. I didn't stick around to investigate. I jogged back toward the house, but halfway there, I heard whistling. It wasn't a tune, more like broken notes, random and off-key, floating from somewhere in the cornfield to my right. The beam from my flashlight caught the top of a head, slick, pale skin, and eyes reflecting the light like an animal's. Then it was gone. By the time I got inside, Anna was at the back door, looking pale. She told me something had been knocking, slow, heavy knocks, on the barn door while she was feeding the goats. When she went to check, there was no one there, but the knocking moved to the other side of the barn. She said it was like something was circling her. We stayed inside for a while, trying to figure out if we should call the sheriff. The cell signal was still out, so we just kept watch from the windows. That's when the motion light by the goat pen came on. I looked out and saw every single goat frozen in place, staring toward the orchard. Their bodies were stiff, ears forward, not making a sound. Then something darted between them, too fast to track, just a blur of pale limbs, before disappearing into the shadows. I grabbed the rifle from the closet, and we decided to check the barn together. It was pitch black except for the beam from my flashlight. The air inside felt wrong, heavy, like being underwater. The goats were pressed against the far wall, breathing fast but still silent. And then, from somewhere in the loft above, came 3 slow knocks, the same sound Anna had heard earlier. I aimed the flashlight upward, but the beam caught nothing but dust in the air. We backed out of the barn and locked it tight, heading for the house. That's when we heard screaming. It was coming from the far end of the orchard, a woman's scream, high-pitched and desperate, cutting through the night. Anna yelled out, thinking maybe it was a neighbor in trouble. The screaming stopped immediately. I wanted to go back for the truck, but it was still parked by the dead combine. We decided to wait it out in the house until morning. Around midnight, the knocking started again, this time on the house. Slow, steady, moving from wall to wall. Every time I peeked outside, there was nothing there. No footprints, no movement, nothing. But then, just after 1 a.m., we both saw it. From the kitchen window at the edge of the yard, a figure stood facing the house. It was hunched forward, with arms too long, hands hanging low to the ground. The head tilted slowly to one side, like it was curious. We killed the lights and stayed low, but the thing didn't move. It just stood there, completely still, for what felt like minutes. Then, without turning, it walked toward the orchard, each step deliberate, disappearing into the trees. When the sun came up, the yard looked untouched. No tracks, no signs of anything breaking in. The goats were back to normal, and the combine started right up like nothing happened. But that night, and every windy night since, we've heard the same slow knocking somewhere out in the orchard. And we keep the rifle loaded by the door. My brother Tom and I run a grain farm outside of Ord, Nebraska. We've had our fair share of long nights during harvest, but nothing prepared us for what happened in October of 2019. We were finishing up in the barn when I noticed a strange glow outside. At first I thought it was headlights, but it was coming from above the old silo. The light pulsed, dimmed, then flared bright white again. Tom went out to look, thinking maybe some pranksters were flying a drone. But when he stepped closer, the glow shifted, like it was following him. I yelled for him to get inside. We both stood at the kitchen window, watching as the light slowly descended behind the silo. Then, a low humming filled the air. The cattle in the pasture started bawling like they were being chased. Just before we decided to call the sheriff, the light shot straight up into the night sky and vanished without a sound. We didn't sleep that night. Tom swears he felt heat on his face when it was close. This happened to me on my uncle's farm in the fall of 2017, just outside of Lebanon, Missouri. I was 19 at the time, helping out for a couple weeks during harvest season. My Uncle Gary owns about 120 acres of land, mostly soybeans, a few head of cattle, and a lot of wooded area. The farm's been in our family for 3 generations, and while I didn't grow up on it, I'd been out there enough to know my way around. That week I was staying in the little guest house behind the main house. It's this small, 1-bedroom cabin-looking thing my uncle built years ago. No TV, just a bed, a couch, and an old radio. You can hear pretty much everything out there. Crickets, wind, cows, even the grain dryer kicking on. It was a Thursday night. Clear skies, nothing unusual. My uncle and aunt had gone into town to visit some friends and weren't expected back until late. I stayed behind to keep an eye on the place and finish up some equipment cleaning. Around 11 p.m., I was just about ready to go to bed when I heard something strange. Metal clanking. At first I figured it was just the wind knocking something loose, but then it kept happening. Not random, like rhythmic. Repeated clanks, like someone was hitting a metal pole or something. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The sound was coming from somewhere near the old equipment shed, about 100 yards from the guest house. I didn't really think anything of it, thought maybe the wind was banging something around inside. So I walked over, flashlight in one hand, my uncle's revolver in the other. He always told me to carry it when I was alone at night. When I got closer to the shed, the clanking stopped. Dead silent. I waited. Nothing. I opened the shed door slowly and peeked inside. The flashlight beam scanned the room. Old tools, rusted parts, tractor wheels, ropes hanging from the beams. Nothing out of place. I started to turn around when I heard something behind the shed, like a foot scraping gravel. I swung the flashlight and gun in that direction, called out, "Hello?" No answer. I stepped around to the back. Nobody. I was about to head back when I saw something in the dirt. Footprints. Bare footprints. And they weren't mine. That's when I felt it. You know that feeling like someone's watching you. My skin went cold. I started walking backward toward the guest house, never turning my back. That's when the clanking started again. But this time, it was coming from the other side of the property. How could someone move that fast? I ran back to the guest house, locked the door, and shut all the blinds. I turned off the lights and just sat there in the dark for a while, listening. Nothing. Not even the wind. About 30 minutes later, I heard the cows. They were mooing like crazy, loud, distressed. I looked out the window and saw them all gathered near the far side of the pasture, almost like they were trying to get away from something. I called my uncle's cell. No answer. Then, just before midnight, I saw something at the tree line. Someone, or something, standing just outside the reach of the motion sensor light. It was tall. I couldn't make out the face, but I could see it was wearing a long white gown or robe or something. It just stood there, not moving, watching the house. I kept the gun pointed at the window. I wanted to shoot, but I also didn't want to risk it unless I had to. Eventually, the thing, or person, walked back into the woods. Not ran, walked. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the gun loaded, flashlight on the nightstand, and my back to the wall. When my uncle and aunt came home around 2 a.m., I rushed out and told them everything. He believed me, didn't even question it, just said, "Damn it, it's back." That's when he told me something I'll never forget. He said years ago, after he first bought the farm, weird things used to happen. Tools would go missing. Animals would get mutilated. He once found a wooden cross stuck in the ground out in the north field with blood all over it. He thought it was someone messing with him, some local cult maybe. But he never found out who or why. He never told anyone, not even my aunt. The next morning we went to the tree line. Nothing was there, no footprints, no robe, no evidence. But we did find something near the cow fence, a dead chicken. But here's the thing, we didn't raise chickens. No farms around us did either. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't go just yet. There are darker tales waiting for you here. Subscribe, if you dare. New horrors arrive every week. And remember, the night is never truly quiet.